All right, guys, sorry about that. My video stopped. And so now I'm on question 5 here. So I had started by subtracting 11 on each side to get it ready in standard form. So x squared minus 6x minus 11 is equal to 0. Then in this case, I'm going to now figure out my a, my b, and my c. So my a, my b, and my c here, a is 1. B is -6, and C is -11. So using quadratic formula, I have x equals opposite of b, so that would be +6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -6 squared would be +36, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is -11, all over 2 times a is 1. All right, plugging that into my calculator, I just start with this portion. So square root of 36 minus 4 times 1 times -11. I ended up with an answer of 8.94. Now I did round that to the nearest 100th. So I have 6 plus or minus 8.94 divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. And so now splitting that up, if I take 8 or 6 plus 8.94 and get my answer divide by 2, I get 7.47. And then 6 minus 8.94 divided by 2, I get negative 1.47. And so looking at my choices, I'm looking for a positive 7.47. That eliminates D and C and B, and then A is negative 1.47. It looks like answer choice A is the one that matches here. All right, moving on to number 6, again, asking me to solve. So I'm using one of my 3 methods. What I notice here, though, is there is no bx term. So that means square root method is an option, and that's the fastest. So I'm going to go with that one, and I'm going to start by adding 7 on each side. And I end up then with 3x is equal to 15. I'm sorry, 3x squared is equal to 15. I'm going to divide each side by 3, and I'm going to get x squared is equal to 5, and then I'm going to apply the square root and get x is equal to, don't forget, positive and negative 2.24. Now we can round this again to the nearest hundredth, which is 2 places after the decimal. So there are my 2 solutions, positive 2.24 and negative 2.24. Moving on to number 7, it says solve x squared plus 4x plus 44 is equal to 0. Now this would be one if I didn't have answer choices that I would probably try factoring on to see if I could find a pair that multiplies to get 44 and adds to get 14. But based on my answer choices, since they're all decimal approximates, that gives me a hint that this one is not factorable. And so I'm going to go ahead and just go straight to the quadratic formula. So quadratic formula, I start by finding my a, my b, and my c. In this case, it would be 1, 14, and 44. And so x equals the opposite of b, negative 14, plus or minus the square root of b squared. So 14 squared would be 196, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a, 2 times 1. So again, using my calculator, just plugging this in as I see it, the square root of 196 minus 4 times 1 times 44 gives me an answer of 4.47. So I have negative 14 plus or minus 4.47 divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. And now separating negative 14 plus 4.47, don't forget to hit equals. Divide by 2 is negative 4.77. And then negative 14 minus 4.47, it equals, then divide by 2, we get negative 9.24. So again, look carefully at your choices there to make sure that you find the one that has both of them being negative. And again, it looks like this one is choice A. All right, question number 8 says a rocket is launched from a 50-foot cliff with an initial velocity of 150 feet per second. The height h after t seconds is given by an equation h equals negative 16t squared plus 150t plus 50. How long is the rocket in the air? So because we're looking for how long, that's time, we're solving for t. Guys, solving for t is what we've been doing all along by using either factoring, square root method, or quadratic formula. So when I look at this problem, I have all three parts, so square root property is out. Because I have a leading coefficient of negative 16, this one would require an AC method to factor. That one takes a while, so I'm going to just jump straight into quadratic formula again. So quadratic formula, A is negative 16, B is 150, and C is 50. Guys, this is nothing different than we've been doing. It's just much bigger numbers. So in this case, instead of x, I'm going to say t is equal to opposite of b, so negative 150 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 150 squared is 22,500 minus 4 times a, which is negative 16, times c, which is 50, all divided by 2 times a, which is 2 times negative 16. When I put this into my calculator, I end up with an answer of 160.31. Again, I rounded. And I'm going to have the negative 150 plus or minus that 160.31, all divided by negative 32. So here's where I break it apart. I take negative 150 plus 160.31 divided by negative 32, and I get an answer of negative 0.32. Then I take negative 150 minus 160.31 divided by negative 32, and I get a 9.70 when I round it. So looking at these two times, remember we always get two answers, but looking at these two times, it doesn't make sense in this problem that the rocket was in the air negative time. So the only answer here that makes sense is the 9.7 seconds. So this rocket was in the air for about 9.7 seconds. All right, number 9 says solve. I notice again, it's already equal to 0, so that's a good thing. However, this one does not have that middle bx term, so that means the square root property is an option, and so to use that, I need to work on getting the x by itself. So in this case, I'm going to add 125 to each side, and I'm going to get 5x squared is equal to 125. Then divide by 5 and get x squared is equal to 25. Then introduce my square root and get x is equal to plus and minus 5 as my solution. Now, if you wanted to do this one using factoring, we could do GCF factoring, which factors out the 5, and I'm left with x squared minus 25 is equal to 0. Then you could work on factoring here, looking for two terms that multiply to get negative 25 and add to eliminate that middle term. And so to do that, you would find that they were 5 and negative 5. And so this would factor to x plus 5 and x minus 5, which there you see your two answers would be negative 5 and positive 5. So factoring would work here. A little challenging, but it's okay. And then quadratic formula would also work on this one. If you wanted to say your A was 5, you just have to remember your B is 0, and then your C is negative 125. You could also do this using quadratic formula. All right, last question's just a bit different. It says, what is the discriminant of the equation 2x squared plus 3x plus 4? So remember, discriminant is found by taking b squared minus 4ac. Remember, it's the inside part of the quadratic formula. And so in this case, I'm going to figure out my a, my b, and my c. So my a is 2, my b is 3, and my c is 4. So I'm plugging in b squared, so 3 squared, that would be 9, minus 4 times 2 times c, which is 4. And so 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 4 is 32. And so I end up with 9 minus 32. Guys, you could do all of this in your calculator in one step if you wanted. 9 minus 32 is negative 23. So my discriminant value is negative 23. So then question B on 10 says, based on this discriminant, how many solutions does the equation have? So we need to remember 3 things. If my discriminant is positive, we have 2 solutions. If my discriminant is 0, we have 1 solution. And if my discriminant is negative, I have no solutions. And so because my discriminant here is negative, that tells me I have 0 solutions, no solutions on this problem. Guys, that discriminant is helpful for us to determine if we want to continue a method. It can be a shortcut because if you find out there's no solutions, you don't need to do the whole quadratic formula on it. You can just stop and say no solutions. All right, I hope that helps. Make sure you're studying, you're preparing, and you're speaking with Mr. Jordan or myself. If you've got any questions, we'll be available before and after school and would be happy to help you. Happy studying.